Greetings, my fellow philosophic thinkers. This is LO3's News Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful Swampy Mangrove of South Florida, and today's date is Tuesday, July 10th, 2018. Ooh, yeah, it's a little bit warm in the heart of downtown Fort Lauderdale. Summertime blues, to be exact, right? That's just how it goes. Gotta deal with it. If not, go somewhere else a little bit cooler at this time, right? Yeah, so I just decided to do another show for the hell of it because I can. However, I was just getting some information on what's going on with Trump pardons the Hammonds, okay? And of course, some of the folks were complaining about, oh, they're arsonists and they're child abusers. And the other side are saying, like, hey, wait a minute. The federal courts are really prosecutors did them wrong. And it doesn't matter what they look like or anything like that. You use this whole black-white thing and white, non-white issue. You know how these media vampires are, just to brainwash you, manipulate, try to divide the people up because they can't think for themselves. Well, this is why individuals like myself have a show like this and many others as well, including I always give kudos to the Republican Broadcast Network. They have a show from Thomas Calavera Stewart. Hopefully I pronounced his name correctly, from Resurrect Republic. We have a chance to check him out. He's really good, and donate money, do contributions to make it happen, because one thing we know for sure, the Associated Press get their information from Stratford, and the left-right paradigm get their sources from AP as well. But they just twist it around and would be parodying to each other, like, oh, no, my record, this news is better than yours. Well, one thing I know for sure, because I'll be talking about that, a few articles on that, and what's that another dude's name who's Trump picked as a nominee for the Supreme Court justice? Yeah, Brett Kavanaugh. Interesting too, because you hear the same thing from the Newsmax and everybody else. Oh, it's gonna be a real tough vote. He's a conservative, and everyone's like wigging out, protesting this petition not to call me an extremist. Well, they haven't really did enough their homework as I speak. It's just that little Trump anxiety, you know. Oh yeah, Trump farts, they will have to count. All right, but the fact is this is a lot bigger than what everyone should know across the board before praising or condemning for the wrong reasons. You have to look at it a lot broader. So I'm going to be talking about those areas and the trade war that was written by Brandon Smith from Bob Livingston, BobLivingstonLetter.com, which is really good. I recommend folks to subscribe and support this site, because they use a lot of historical backup and a lot more merit that the other mainstream clowns don't want you to know, okay? So we're going to start off here on President Trump pardons the Hammonds. This one came off of Oregon Live. It was around came out today. So as it reads, President Trump pardons Oregon ranchers whose plight led to refuge occupation. And so this is by Maxine Bernstein from the Oregonian. President Trump on Tuesday commuted the sentence of 2 Eastern Oregon ranchers serving time in federal prison for sitting to public land in a cause that inflamed their supporters and gave rise to the armed takeover of the Mollard National Wildlife Refuge. The decision will free Dwight Hammond Jr., 76, and his son, Stephen Hammond, 49, convicted in 2012 of arson on Harney County land, where they had grazing rights for their cattle. They were ordered back to prison in early 2016 to serve out 5-year sentences. Then they were on probation. They got thrown back in prison. So I don't know why people are some of these news sites that are like complaining about this, about the Hammonds being pardoned. So that's a question, okay? People got to look at this in the bigger picture. I'll continue on here. The Hammonds are devoted family men, respected contributors to their local community, and have widespread support from their neighbors, local law enforcement, and farmers and ranchers across the West. The White House said in a prepared statement, justice is overdue for Dwight and Steve Hammond, both of whom are entirely deserving these grants of executive clemency. Trump's move marks yet another big victory for backers of the Hammonds, including Ammon Bundy and his followers, who repeatedly cited the case as a trigger for the 41-day occupation of the wild refuge that abutted the Hammond family ranch. But Bundy viewed the case as an example of the federal government run amok. A jury acquitted him and other key takeover figures of all federal charges. You know why? Because there were more FBI informants with the Mahler 7. Okay, there's like 13 that was supposed to be with that group were actually narcs. And what was funny about that, because one of those areas you gotta look, but even when the couple of them admitted they were working for the FBI, and they wanted more of these witnesses to question it, and the prosecutor, I call them, oh no, we can't have that. We have to have all these individuals will be exposed. And you know what? So the jury gave a big middle finger, right? F you to the federal government, and found them not guilty. That's what you call jury nullification. Both Hammonds were convicted of setting fire in 2001, and the son was convicted of setting a second fire in 2006. A federal judge initially sentenced the father to 3 months in prison and the son to 1 year after they successfully argued that the 5-year mandatory minimum was unconstitutional. They served time and were out in prison when prosecutors challenged the shorter terms before the 9th U.S. Court of Appeals and won. Another federal judge in 2015 sent the ranchers back to complete the full sentence. So that is very pathetic, if you know what I'm saying here. So continue on here. As of this month, Dwight Hammond has served 2 years and 8 months in prison and 31 months of supervised release. His son has served 3 years and 3 months in prison and 2 years of supervised release. Susie Hammond, Dwight's wife and the mother to Stephen, says she heard rumblings that the Trump was considering pardon. I have a sense that things are moving forward, and I have faith in our president. If anyone's going to ask to help them, he'd be the one, she said Wednesday. In the clemency petitions, lawyers for Hammond cited the ranchers' longtime service to their Harney County community and the severity of their punishment that the trial judges support and their family situation. Unlike some cases where clemency may outrage the community, clemency for the Hammonds would be embraced by the Oregon community, both rural and urban, wrote Larry Matasar, Steve Hammond's attorney. The lengthy sentences, plus the U.S. Bureau of Land Management's refusal in 2014 to renew a grazing permit for the Hammond Ranch, have crippled the operation. The family has said the Hammonds have appealed the federal agency's denial. If the Hammonds are unable to return to the ranch in the near future, the legacy and livelihood of Dwight and Stephen Hammond have been building for their family could truly be lost. Matasar wrote on this petition, clemency will not only serve as a balm to the community's agonists about these sentences, but very practically give the Hammonds a real chance to keep their ranch afloat. Dwight Hammond has prescribed burn about 300 acres of his own land and then traveled onto the Bureau of Land Management property and burned an additional 139 acres. His lawyer wrote, the elder, that he was trying to fend off invasive species. Prosecutors argued the fire also was to cover up illegal deer poaching and got out of control, placing firefighters who had to be airlifted out of the area in grave danger. The federal pursuit of the Hammonds followed years of permit violations and unauthorized fires. They never accepted responsibility, said Oregon former U.S. Attorney Amanda Marshall. Her office appealed the lighter sentences because she said the trial didn't have discretion to depart from the mandatory minimum sentence. It mind boggles me. You see what's happening? They want to appeal on the sentencing. How is that? Can you explain to me how that's constitutional, Miss Amanda Marshall? Explain that to me. How does it supersede the Sixth Amendment? The Hammonds could have faced less than a year in prison under a plea offer they declined, she said. The Hammond lawyers, including attorney Kendra Matthews for the elder Hammond, pointed out in their clemency petitions that the father and son faced other sanctions. They paid $400,000 and $220,000 2015 and settled a civil suit brought by the government and are having a hard time sustaining the cattle operation because of the grazing permit denial. They cited the opinion of the trial judge, U.S. District Judge Michael Hogan, who found the 5-year sentence grossly disproportionate to the severity of the offenses here, and noted that the fires didn't endanger any people or property. Harney County Sheriff David Ward, U.S. Rep. Greg Walden, Butler County Sheriff Brian Wolf, as well as leaders of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association and Oregon Farm Bureau, wrote letters in support of the Hammonds clemency petition. Interesting, okay? This is funny because some of these crybabies I see from these one-dimensional news sites, New Yorker and Daily Chaos, are saying all this garbage. They don't want to really look into this pretty damn deep. That's why I want to focus on the local Oregon Live, because it's perfect to see what's been really happening. Ward, who was the face of law enforcement during the 2016 occupation of the wildlife refuge in this county, wrote that he personally felt the initial sentences and financial penalties cover the debt owed to society. This case was thrust into national spotlight when, for the lack of a better term, anti-government extremists exploited the Hammond family and began attempting to use their unfortunate circumstance to gain support for their own agendas, Ward wrote. He noted that Dwight and Stephen Hammond rejected pressure they faced from Ammon Bundy and others to defy federal orders and instead turned themselves to prison. It is my humble opinion that justice would be better served if these gentlemen were afforded the proper opportunity to return home, Ward wrote. For Dwight to spend his remaining years with his wife, for Stephen to return to his family, and to set an example that, along with being a nation of laws, we are a nation of compassion and forgiveness. Other letters of support describe good deeds done for their neighbors, children and grandchildren schools, the county's 4-H and FAA club, and many others in need. They spoke of Dwight Hammond's sincerity, decency, his humility, and the respect for him in Harney County. A man who dressed up as Santa Claus for school kids and what one friend described as a real-life John Wayne. Dwight Hammond's wife, who is alien, lives alone in Burns. Steve Hammond is married with 3 children. I'm seeking a commutation of my sentence so that I can return home to take care of my wife, Dwight Hammond wrote. I live in fear that one of us will pass before we are reunited. Trump's actions follows a flurry of pardons, including for Dennis DeSouza, a conservative author convicted of illegal campaigning contributions. Lewis Libby Jr., a former aide to Vice President Dick Cheney, which I'm not crazy about Dick Cheney, okay? He's a CFR stooge. Former Arizona Sheriff Joe Aparo and Alice Johnson, 63, serving life for her role in a cocaine distribution ring. Very interesting indeed. So you have to really look at everything, and the people in the town as well. Alright, this is one of the areas you have to look at how deep this thing goes. And some people still complaining about this. But however, I'm going to hit this next one here. Next article by the Washington Standard. And it's by Tim Brown. And it reads here, Trump pardons Hammonds. Now, this is good news. On Tuesday, President Trump pardoned Oregon cattle rancher Dwight and Stephen Hammond, who's been serving sentences for arson. A statement from the White House reads as follows. Today, President Donald Trump signed executive grants of clemency, full pardons for Dwight Lincoln Hammond Jr. and his son Stephen Hammond. The Hammonds are multi-generation cattle ranchers in Oregon, imprisoned in connection with a fire that leaked onto a small portion of our neighboring public grazing land. The evidence at trial regarding the Hammonds' responsibility for the fire was conflicting, and the jury acquitted them on most of the charges. At the Hammonds' original sentencing, the judge noted that they are respected in the community and that imposing a mandatory minimum 5-year prison sentence would shock the conscience and be grossly disproportionate to the severity of their conduct. As a result, the judge imposed significantly lesser sentences than the previous administration. However, following an overzealous appeal that resulted in the Hammonds being sentenced to 5 years in prison, that was unjust, and I have to agree. is like, hey, it was due to resentencing. It's like more of a double jeopardy thing, correct? Remember, they're lawyers, they know more than us. Dwight Hammond is now 76 years old and has served approximately 3 years in prison. Steve Hammond is 49 and has served approximately for 4 years in prison. They have also paid $400,000 to the United States to settle a related civil suit. The Hammonds are devoted family men, respected contributors to their local community, and have widespread support from their neighbors, local law enforcement, and farmers and ranchers across the West. Justice is overdue for Dwight and Stephen Hammond, both whom are entirely deserving these grants of executive clemency. Well, it took long enough, but thank you, President Trump. You did the right thing in this matter. And for all of those who took the time to keep the story alive and urge people to sign a petition to the White House on behalf of the Hammonds, thank you. It should be noted that the protests that took place in Oregon a couple of years ago were a response to the injustice of the Hammonds face. As a result, Robert LaVoy Finicum was killed by Oregon State Police. It was interesting about it because even the spokesman, unfortunately I forgot the person's name, but David Knight from InfoWars and the gentleman from Young Turks has something in common. They believe it was unjust, unacceptable, and they condemned it in their own different views. Some of them may have their differences, but they both said it was wrong, and I thank them for that. To those who led the protests, were all acquitted of all charges, and reporter Pete Santilli had all of his charges dismissed. No doubt Finicum would have been found not guilty as well, but that's not how tyrants work, is it? Today is a day to celebrate a wrong that has not been fully made right, but has definitely turned in the right direction. And that is absolutely correct. So this is why you have to always look at these areas. They took care of the responsibilities, and the attorney went, oh well, it's not fair. I want to appeal it to get brownie points and get aroused. That's remember, that's what we call them, prostituters. Prostituting terms like that, call them prostituters, tyrannical buffoons at his finest. So I am very pleased that this happened, because I'll tell you all you folks this: if the federal government does it, it'll be called exceptionalism, right? But this is why it had to be done. And I'm not a big Trump worshiper or anything like that, but I will give him kudos. I'll give him the thumbs up for choosing wisely. Yes, I can be very fair to this man as well, even though some people may have the case of Trump's-iety and I don't. And you know what? I am very happy about it because I've been keeping tabs on this for a good period of time. And of course, the Mueller 7 case, all that, everything's backfiring. People are waking up, which is good, because remember, even in a jury case, like what happened with the Mueller 7, jury nullification is legit. You all have that right to say not guilty if you believe the law is unjust or poorly implemented. And so I am very pleased with this area. But we'll just hear some of the folks that may have a complaint on here. And this is from Daily Chaos. To cheer of right-wing militias, Trump issues pardon to child abusers and serial artists by Jen Hayden. Let's see what this person has to say, shall we? And of course, it's cute. They have the Roman 3, like the 3% with the 13 colonies of the flag. They have a Confederate flag of a picture. These guys have to be thrilled with the Hammonds' pardon. So she assumes that they're praising for the Hammonds. I don't know for sure because I never asked them that question, but they assume. In a press release, Donald Trump announced full pardons of Oregon ranchers Dwight and Stephen Hammond. The pair had been long on the focus of right-wing extremists who rallied to their side, including Hammond and Ryan Bundy, who organized their supporters to take over the Mueller Wild Refuge in January 2016. The standoff lasted roughly 5 weeks before the last supporters were convinced to lay down their weapons and surrender to the FBI. Dwight and Stephen Hammond have a history of arson in Oregon, setting fires to nearby properties to allegedly help their own ranch, despite being repeatedly warned against such action by the Bureau of Land Management, firefighters, and law enforcement. They are known to have started at least 5 major fires in Oregon, the hardy Hammond fire in 2001, which was set to cover an illegal deer slaughter and endanger 3 hunters in the area. The Fur Creek fire in 2005, the Crumbo Boot fire in 2006, the Lower Bridge Creek fire in 2006, and the Grandad fire of 2006. The Hammonds claimed they were controlled fires, but they mostly certainly were not in the case of the 2006 Crumbo Boot fire. Steve Hammond ordered his nephew, Dusty, to start a fire that Dusty barely escaped. Making matters worse, even worse, for Bureau of Land Management, the firefighters were trapped in the raging fire, also barely escaping with their lives. Their testimony eventual pleas proved they knew everything they were doing was dangerous and illegal. This is from the Oregon Public Broadcasting in 2012. Light of the whole countryside on fire, Dusty and his uncle told him, "I started lighting matches." Afterwards, he said, over lunch, his grandfather and uncle instructed him to keep my mouth shut. Nobody needs to know anything about the fire. Despite the threats, Dusty ended up testifying against his uncle and his grandfather, who were violently abusive to the teens. In 2004, Dusty used a paperclip to scratch the initials into his chest, upsetting his grandparents, who had custody of Dusty. They called in Uncle Stephen, who was raising kids, was simply raising cattle or dogs. 2. Disciplined the boys, and Steve cruelly used sandpaper to initial off the boy's chest from abuse investigation in 2004. Reports continues. Dusty said that Steve told him that he was not going to let Dusty to face the family by carving on himself. Dusty stated that Steve then took him and began to sand the initials off his chest. Steve sanded on each side of his chest for at least 5 minutes. Steve used a very coarse sandpaper to sand off the initials. The reports go on. Dusty told me that the process was very painful, but he did not care. He did not cry because he knew that Steve would continue the process for a long period of time. Steve vowed to fillet the initials off if the sanding didn't do the trick. That wasn't the only documented abuse. The reports describe as Steve as 35-year-old, 6'2" and 200 pounds. Reports said that when Dusty was caught with alcohol, Steve had driven him at least 10 miles from the ranch and made him walk back. That's pretty nice. You should see when they do that in Turkey. It's 20 miles, okay? But I will continue on here. Steve, the report further states when Dusty was caught with tobacco, Steve made him eat 2 cans of smokeless tobacco, then again drove him 10 miles from the ranch and made him walk back. Woo, interesting. Do you call this child abuse? In 2012, a jury found the Hammonds guilty of starting 2 fires. In 2015, they were finally sentenced to 5 years in prison in order to pay their $400,000 in restitution. The conviction and sentencing became a flashpoint for anti-government extremists and the Bundy family in particular for their consequence-free armed standoff in Nevada. Brothers Amon and Ryan Bundy led the takeover of the Wild Refuge, demanding the Hammonds be free from prison. Militia type from all over the country brought the guns and supplies to hold up the federally managed Wild facility for roughly 5 weeks. The takeover came to close after standoff leaders were ambushed by the FBI and Oregon State Police as they sought to meet with a nearby sheriff who was friendly to the cause. Standoff leader and noted fierce anti-government advocate LaVoy Finicum was killed by police after he jumped out of his vehicle and tried to pull his gun on law enforcement. You are one lying sack of crap, are you, honey? You are a liar. How dare you put this in your article? How dare you? I seen that video. He didn't put a gun in anyone. He got shot in the side. That's pathetic. This is how some of these idiots want to write, okay? And don't get me wrong, I can be critical of some of these people at times, too, on the other side of the hammer and some of their actions. But you know what? When you saying he pulled a gun, you are a liar. I will continue on here. Like the pardon of former Sheriff Aparo, another militia favorite, Donald Trump is staying clear and signals to armed right-wing extremists that he is with them, and you better believe if Donald Trump faces federal charges himself, he will demand and likely receive their support. This pardon might be one of the most terrifying moves Trump has made to date. He is very, very clearly angling for loyalty from these heavily armed extremists. Look at the absolutely bonkers language issued by the White House announcing the pardon. Today, President Donald Trump signed executive grants and clemency full pardons of Dwight Lincoln Hammond Jr. and his son, Stephen Hammond. The Hammonds are multi-generation cattle ranchers in Oregon and prison in connection with the wildfire that leaked onto a small portion of neighboring public grazing land. Evidence at the trial regarding the Hammonds' responsibility for the fire was conflicting, and the jury acquitted them on both of the charges. At the Hammonds' original sentencing, the judge noted that they are respected in the community, that imposing a mandatory minimum 5 years prison sentence would shock the conscience and be grossly disproportionate to the severity of their conduct. As a result, the judge imposed significantly lesser sentences. The previous administration, however, filed an overzealous appeal that resulted in the Hammonds being sentenced to 5 years in prison. This was unjust. Dwight Hammond is now 76 years old and has served approximately 3 years in prison. Stephen Hammond is 49 and has served approximately 4 years in prison. They also paid $400,000 to the United States to settle a related civil suit. The Hammonds, devoted family men, respected contributors to the local community, and have widespread support from their neighbors, local law enforcement, and farmers and ranchers across the West. Justice overdue for Dwight and Steve Hammond, both of whom are entirely deserving of these grants of executive clemency. There is only one reason for Donald Trump to pardon Dwight and Stephen Hammond. He is doing so, again, the loyalty and support of hardened anti-government extremists and militias. This should frighten each and every one of us. So what you telling me, young lady? You want to trust the government to protect you, leave all your security eggs in the hands of them? Do you remember what happened at Waco and Ruby Ridge? And what happened when Rodney King, which I'm not saying he's completely innocent. I'm not saying even all these guys aren't innocent either of some of the certain actions. All right? You want to leave the government the security eggs of them. That's pathetic. Very null and void. Stop being an extremist, but I'm very damn critical. You want us to you support the federal ID card? Become a federal agent that has to be complied on October 1st, 2020? Yeah, look it up, please, folks. I posted stuff on Facebook and Twitter and all that. But it's right there. When she said he pointed a gun, acted pointed a gun, right there she's lying. Okay? How dare she say that? Right there, this article is null and void. Okay? That's what happens when you have lamestream media. Okay, I'm gonna have to put a video on. I may have to add that video on there as well to get this to let everyone see for themselves. Because I am very, very discouraged on that. And you talking to a person if they actually done things that's dead wrong. Okay, that's one thing for sure. I'm not gonna argue about that. Like the Oklahoma City bombing when they blew up that Murrah building, I condemn that with a passion. But there's still a lot of questions in that as well. What you telling me what happened to Waco was okay? I don't think so. The designer of the Fleur Project proved that the ATF were responsible for the deaths of most of those individuals at the Davidian Ranch. Now, I'm not praising David Koresh on his molestation by any means. That's not justifiable. So you want to say government's right and the people are wrong. So explain to me, Ms. Hayden, how come the Mueller 7 were acquitted? Okay? Explain that to me. You probably can't. You probably want to bitching and hollering because you probably sold your rear end to the establishment. Probably one of Stratford's little pet peeves, for all I know. This is saying that allegedly speaking. But one of the areas you have to look at, my friends, this is why you never trust the government. But this one here, Ms. Hayden, believes feds know best. And everyone in the federal entities are wrong or bad folks? Absolutely not. But the higher ups, you got to question. I'm not going around going extremist and going ape crap or anything like that, but this is very assumptuous. So right there, in my view, and in good faith, the article is a big discrepancy. I'll put that video up there. I'm going to put that video up there too, so you folks can judge for yourselves, all right? All right, so I'll be right back, so stay tuned. All right, get that ready. I'm going to add a couple videos to that on the whole LaVoy Finicum, like it is, yeah, Finicum. Finicum, yeah, because like I said, I had to call out Miss Hayden for that. She's just lying. If you're still going to buy that garbage, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. They're the same people that believe Rudy Giuliani stated that, hey, what happened? The reason why they attacked on 9/11 because of our freedoms. That same mindset. Unacceptable. So, enough of that. I'm going to be, this one came from the freedomoutpost.com, originated by Michael Snyder's website. It's called economiccollapseblog.com. It says here, liberals are freaking out about the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, but it is conservatives that should be concerned. And as it reads here, the weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth has begun to laugh, but the truth is that Donald Trump could have nominated someone far more conservative on Monday night. Over the next several months, there are endless protests in Washington, D.C. as liberals moan and groan about the end of our freedoms. And Brett Kavanaugh will be relentlessly portrayed as a conservative devil by the mainstream media, even though the NBC News is insisting that Kavanaugh would make the high court solidly conservative if he is confirmed. The reality of the matter is there are some pretty good reasons why conservatives should be deeply concerned about this pick. Just because a Republican president nominates someone to the Supreme Court does not mean that individual will make a good judge. For example, Ronald Reagan nominated Anthony Kennedy in 1987. He turned out to be a complete and utter disaster. If Reagan had nominated someone different, the entire modern history of the U.S. Supreme Court could have been completely different. With the court still so divided, the stakes are incredibly high, and we must not get another Kennedy. So it's troubling that Brett Kavanaugh, clerk for Kennedy, has always had nothing but good things to say about him. Anyone that would look like Justice Kennedy is any sort of a role model is definitely not fit for a seat on the highest court in the land. Beyond its connections to Kennedy, what is troubling conservatives more than anything are some of his opinions while serving on the appellate court level. For instance, not too long ago, he ruled that an illegal immigrant has a right to an abortion in the United States. Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who was appointed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia by President George W. Bush, accepted the assumption in a dissenting opinion he filed last October in the case Garza versus Hargan, that a teenage illegal alien caught at the border and put in detention has a right to an abortion in the United States. In that opinion, he also added that all parties of this case recognize Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey as precedents we must follow. Really? Although this entire career, Kavanaugh has been extremely engaged in Republican politics, but he has never expressed public opposition to Roe versus Wade in a single time. So despite the outrageous claims of the left that Roe versus Wade is about to be overturned, the truth is that we actually have no idea how Brett Kavanaugh would rule on Roe versus Wade, and that is absolutely frightening. In addition, back in 2011, Kavanaugh decided not to rule against Obamacare's individual mandate. Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who was appointed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for District of Columbia by President George W. Bush, has declined to rule against Obamacare's individual mandate when it came before his court in 2011, and argued that the case could not be decided by a federal court until at least 2015 of the Anti-Injunction Act. All 9 members of the Supreme Court, including Justice Antonin Scalia, Samuel L. Alito, and Clarence Thomas, who later joined in opinions in the Obamacare case that Supreme Court decided in 2012 that rejected the argument Kavanaugh embraced that the Anti-Inquisition Act prevented a pre-2015 ruling on the Obamacare mandate. Fascistic healthcare at its finest, right? All the experts on the television keep telling us how conservative Kavanaugh is, but looking at his record, that is hard to see. And let us not forget his extremely close ties to the Bush family. A brief period in private law practice, he became Bush's White House counsel and then staff secretary before he was nominated to be a federal judge. He met his wife while working at the White House, where he was the president's personal secretary. Ooh, so how many secrets did they know we don't? Donald Trump likes to think that he is making his mark on the Supreme Court, but the reality of the matter is that we probably would have gotten the exact same nomination if George W. Bush was still in the White House today. I hope that he proves me wrong. But I believe that the nomination of Kavanaugh is a huge mistake. I believe that he is a moderate, especially on social issues, and I do not trust him. But most conservatives are going to assume that Kavanaugh must be wonderful since he's Trump's choice, and they are going to rally around him. Trump Nation! Trump Nation! Doesn't matter if you feel contamination. Exactly. Indeed, it will be the left that will try to keep Kavanaugh off the court. And within minutes of the announcement of his nomination, there are already hundreds of protesters on the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court building. Oh, Trump nominated him. Let's go out there. Moo! Moo! The whole conformity. It's face value, but I never studied the man. I'm terrible at reading the fine print. It didn't take for long for protests to start. Around 15 minutes after the announcement, chance has shifted. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Kavanaugh has got to go. Some protesters have makeshift signs that have been updated with the nominee only minutes after the announcement. And of course, good old Bernie Sanders on the hand to whip the protesters into frenzy. Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont told the crowd of protesters that he should be ready to challenge the nomination. Are you ready for a fight? Are you ready to defend Roe versus Wade? Sanders said, this is a tough fight, but it's a fight that we can win. We have the people on our side. Now we have to go state by state by state to make sure senators do what the constituents want. Send the whole crowd, Sanders, feel the hype. Feel the hype. We hate freedom, but we want free crap. That's what we say along that way when he speaks, right? And absolutely. If Democrats were smart, they would conduct some token protests to make it look good and then confirm Kavanaugh as quickly as possible. Absolutely. If he was picked by Obama or Clinton, they'll be on a frenzy and going, yeah, it'll be a ticker tape parade, all saying kumbaya, right? With the Trump in the White House, they simply are not going to get an activist liberal judge onto the court. Another judge in the mold of Anthony Kennedy is about the best they could possibly hope for, and that is very likely what they're going to get with Kavanaugh. In the end, it is true conservatives that should be finding this nomination, but we all know that it's simply not going to happen. Of course, because he's got nominated by Trump, it has to be good. So you see what this whole left-right paradigm does? It's totally been whitewashed, watered down, stagnated. So if you're going to go on there, I'm going to footstep of the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm convinced one thing. You folks may be hired, got paid to be there. Oh, so this is why I'm laughing. When I hear about all this hype about the Supreme Court justice, people watch on the idiot box of Fox News, the CNBC, the Stratford family communications. You know what? I just have to sit back and I'm going to find out what this guy's all about. So this is just part of it. That's why I'm just laughing, because Trump nominated him, has to be good. Well, we'll see what Sons of Liberty has to say by Sons of Liberty report, and it's written by Tim Brown. Brett Kavanaugh, a controlled judge who aided in cover-up of the Vince Foster case. Think about it. Vince Foster, they claim he committed suicide during the Clinton's presidency in the 90s. Do you recall that, my friends? Possible Whitewater scandal. They claim he committed suicide, but some other people say he was murdered. Let's see what he has to say here. Seriously, I don't know why the professed conservative party would not put forward its most conservative nominee for the Supreme Court to replace Anthony Kennedy, but this is how it goes. They took a good name and they let you down. It is a case with Brett Kavanaugh, and if there's one thing that people should remember is that Kavanaugh was an independent assistant attorney, IAA, in charge of the final investigation in the Vince Foster case. Kavanaugh took over for Miguel Rodriguez, who had revealed the Foster case was a homicide. Kavanaugh stated that he would whatever it took to advance his career, but was ordered by 3 federal judges to keep the witness statements and Rodriguez discoveries in the final document. Well, conservative liberal media outlets have failed to cover the information that was scattered throughout the report, even to this day. They have been just as complicit as was Kavanaugh in the cover-up of what clearly the murder of Vince Foster. I'm not the only one saying this. The video titled Vince Foster Cover-Up, the FBI and the Press, is a must-view and demonstrates why Kavanaugh is part of the Clinton swamp people were promised that Trump would drain. And don't think Trump doesn't know this. From the Washington Post, and you can see it all here. He called theories of possible foul play very serious, and the circumstance of Foster's death very fishy. He had intimate knowledge of what was going on, Trump said. Speaking of Foster's relationship with the Clintons at the time, he knew everything that was going on, and then all of a sudden he committed suicide. He added, I don't bring Foster's death up because I don't know to really discuss it. I will say there are people who continue to bring it up because they think it was absolutely a murder. I don't know that because I don't think it's fair. Of course, he's going to give the people what they want to hear and then backpedal it slightly in order to save face. Anyone who has looked at the Vince Foster case cannot sit with a straight face and honestly declare it was suicide. The official Vince Foster cited the following. There was evidence of grand jury witness intimidation. Foster's car was not at the park, so he couldn't have it driven himself to the location to commit suicide. Foster didn't own a gun, a .38 caliber revolver that was allegedly used, and his fingerprints were not even on the weapon. Police brought the gun to the scene and planted it there. Yet Kavanaugh has gone along with the official story. Why? Was it so that would be made a federal judge after the fact by President George W. Bush? And there's a video in here if you want to look at some more. Does Kavanaugh have a history of conservative rulings? Yes, if he does, but as Victor W. Paulier, a former chief of information systems development for the U.S. Agency for International Development, pointed out, he falls into the category of a controlled judge who, like Chief Justice John Roberts, can be allowed to pursue his own conservative legal views until they need him in the 11th hour. Crucial case to act as a swing vote. And in fact, Paulier expressed in a post on Monday even his thoughts on Kavanaugh. There's a video on that too, so you can see it for yourself. He wrote, Kavanaugh has an advantage because he has the most consistent conservative judicial track record known of the known candidates, one that mirrors Trump's views on several key issues, including immigration, trade deals, abortion, and gun rights, according to two sources familiar with the current White House selection. I support Bill of Rights as a whole, okay? So this ties one-dimensional rhetoric here. For example, Kavanaugh wrote the majority opinion in Heller versus the District of Columbia, which unapologetically embraced the Second Amendment and argued that judges should not reinterpret the founders' original intent. Actually, Heller is not as pro-Second Amendment as he thinks. Kavanaugh openly allowed that the right could be regulated or restriction by state law and even some federal law, as long as it did not take away the right completely. That is a slippery slope. He's a compromiser. This day and age, building up to the system's patriotic. I will continue on here. His ruling is considered the most pro-Second Amendment opinion of any Court of Appeals opinion, one that has been cited repeatedly by Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who believes every time it comes out, whether Spire's in his room. You folks can figure it out. But conservatives who understand government conspiracies are rightly concerned about Kavanaugh's early association with Special Counsel Ken Starr, a Republican who was called in to cover up for the deep state's murder of Vince Foster, the Clinton financial lawyer who knew where all the Clinton's cash was hidden overseas, as a Free Beacon wrote. Kavanaugh, 53, is a judge on the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. His first rose to national attention for his work on the Starr Report, as well as the investigation into the death of former Clinton legal advisor Vince Foster. The Vince Foster cover-up wasn't a sample case of erroneous conclusion based upon weak evidence. It was a full-blown conspiracy to intimidate witnesses that proved the official version was a lie. Such active measures cannot be done by honest FBI agents unless they know they are obstructing justice. Vince was killed somewhere in the nation's capital and then later dumped at Fort Marcy Park, where it was made to look like a suicide scene. Trouble is, he had already bled out elsewhere, and supposed suicide handgun was placed in the wrong hand. Patrick Knowlton was a key witness exposing a major flaw in the official story. In fact, that Foster's car wasn't in the parking lot. It was in the government's harassment of this witness that the major evidence of conspiracy lays. Knowlton was sitting in the car in the Fort Marcy Park lot At the time, the government claimed Foster drove up and went into the park to kill himself, but Knowlton testified the car that was in this spot did not match Foster's car. Federal agents also tried to intimidate him into leaving, knowing that he was watching their movements. After Knowlton went to authorities with his suspicions of foul play, he began to be subjected to constant harassment by blurry men trying to intimidate him on the street and in restaurants. Only when Knowlton went to give testimony at the Starr Commission did he recognize the men as Starr FBI agents. They were all sitting up front. As Starr's deputy, there was no way that Kavanaugh could not have known there was a cover-up and conspiracy going on the treatment of Knowlton. So despite Kavanaugh's conservative rulings as a judge, in my opinion, he falls to the category of a controlled judge who, like Chief Justice John Roberts, can be allowed to pursue his own conservative legal views until they need him in the 11th hour. Crucial case to act as a swing vote. This is what happens to Roberts when he switched sides at the last minute on Obamacare. Kavanaugh will always be subject to blackmail of that Starr did to Knowlton, and you went along with it. That also implies a more lethal threat of what they did to Vince Foster when he got cold feet about protecting the Clintons. Go ahead and call this a win if you like. I'm not so sure it was a good pick when we have others who are so far more conservative than Kavanaugh. It is an issue who Trump thinks the Senate will confirm, and shame on Republicans in this matter, as they didn't want conservatives who are not involved in a cover-up. While the time will tell whether or not Kavanaugh is worth his salt, where there are important issues that affected the nation, including the cover-up of Vince Foster's death. He does not appear to be trustworthy to this author. I think Paulier is exactly right on this one. And you know what? It does make a lot of sense. So I recommend, folks, is check out the video to make your own judgment. So what you got is another bellboy. Mr. Kavanaugh, yes, master. Bend over. How far, please? Get the bone. Okay. He's like, it's a bone fetcher. That's all he is, according to this article. So that's one thing, my friends. You never trust the government. So don't rely on the courts to solve everyone's problems. We got to do things on a local level. Got jury notification and all that as well. Notification is a solution. Don't rely on the federal system to tell you what's right or wrong with some bogus half-assed opinions. They're supposed to interpret the laws, not give a pathetic, unmeritable viewpoint, which many of them do. All right? And that's why I call it an opinion. Who cares? I want merit. I want facts. I want concrete evidence. Prima facie on his face. So you're going to bring in a clown like Kavanaugh? Forget about it. It's like, who let the cows out? Moo. Absolutely. So, going to do one more here from a gentleman named Brandon Smith. And it came out, I just got it today on my email by Bob Lewison's alert. It says here, China has been preparing for a trade war for over a decade, written by Brandon Smith. The crash of 2008 brought with its host of strange economic paradigms rarely have ever seen in history. Paradigms which have turned normal fiscal analysis on its head, while some core fundamentals remain the same no matter what occurs. The reporting of this data have been deliberately skewed to hide the truth. But what is the truth? Well, at the bottom, the truth is that most economies around the world are far weaker than the picture governments and central banks have painted. It is especially true for the United States. Our country has been pursuing an opposite strategy for many years now, meaning it has been hiding its economic preparedness for more than its weakness. I am, of course, speaking of China. In the world of alternative analysis, we mentioned China. Several issues always arise. China's expanding debt burden, government spending on useless infrastructure programs like Go Cities, China's central bank and its corporate subset misreporting financial figures regularly, etc. All these things fuel the notion that when a global fiscal disaster inevitably takes place, it will emanate first from China. They also give the American public the false impression that a trade war against China will easily be won, and that China will immediately falter under the weight of its own vowed instabilities. However, if one actually studies China's behavior and activities the past decade, they would see a method to their apparent madness. In fact, some of China's actions seem to suggest that a nation has been preparing for years for an exact geopolitical conditions we see today. It is as if someone warned them ahead of time. In terms of prepping for a trade war with the U.S., China has implemented several important steps. For example, for at least the past 10 years, the country has been shifting away from a pure export economy and reducing its reliance on sales and goods to the U.S., which is a fact. In 2018, China's consumer purchases of goods is expected to surpass that of the American consumers. For the past 5 years, domestic consumption in China accounted for between 55% to 65% economic growth, and private consumption was a primary driver of the Chinese economy, not exports. The argument that China is somehow dependent on U.S. markets and consumers in order to keep its economy alive is simply a lie. China is now just as enticing at a retail market as the U.S., and its domestic market can pick up some of the slack in the event that U.S. markets are suddenly closed to Chinese exports. This problem of swiftly growing Chinese debt is presented often as a key argument against the nation surviving a global economic shift or trade war, with its shadow banking system threatening to unleash a long-hidden credit crisis and stock market plunge. But this is not the complete story. The exact amount of fiat printing that China's central bank undertook after the 2008 crash is not known. Some estimates suggest China's debt now sits around 250% of its gross domestic product. By normal standards, that this would suggest a credit crisis is imminent. But was China's sudden interest in debt expansion in a retractionary matter, or was it part of a bigger plan? Just after 2008, common argument against China's resilience was a notion that China was dependent on holding U.S. dollar reserve in order to keep its own currency weak, meaning Chinese companies had to sell goods to the U.S. in exchange for dollars, which they exchanged to the central bank for yuan. Okay, China's central bank held those trillions of dollars in reserves as a means to keep the dollar stronger on the global market and the yuan weaker, thus supporting and perpetuating the old export market. Obviously, this argument is no longer applicable or outright absurd. China's debt expansion and treasure bond issuance actually started way back in 2005 under the Panda Bond Program. So it's something to go look at too, the Panda Bond Program. At the time, it was treated like a novelty or joke by the mainstream economic communities. Today, it is a powerhouse of the yuan-denominated assets are spreading around the world. China no longer needs to hold dollars or dollar-denominated assets in order to keep its currency weaker for export markets. It can simply inflate and monetize its own debt, just like the U.S. does. But why would China bother to do this at all? Why jump into the same debt game has caused so much trouble for Western nations? Perhaps because they know something we don't. During the initial phase of the derivatives crisis, the possibility of China joining the International Monetary Fund special drawing rights basket leaped to the forefront. As the yuan, as an SDR basket member, its potential to become a financial center for global trade rather than just export or import hub would be ensured. But the IMF set certain requirements before China can join. One of the requirements was far greater currency liquidity and more freely usable yuan market. In other words, for China to join the SDR basket, they would first need to go into considerable debt. Interesting there, right? This is exactly what they did, not to prop up their banking system, though this made for a valid excuse, or to necessarily prop up their stock markets. Rather, China won a seat at the table of the New World Order, and they bought that seat through mass debt expansion. China was officially included in the SDR basket in 2016. China has been a very vocal proponent of the SDR basket system. And it becomes clear why, if you understand what the globalists intend for the further of the world's monetary framework. This plan was first outlined in the globalist-controlled Economist magazine in 1988 in an article calling for the beginnings of a global currency in 2018. The article states that the U.S. economy and the role of the dollar as a world reserve would have to be diminished, and that the IMF special drawing rights basket could be used as a bridge to set up a single currency for all world economies. The currency would of course, be administered and controlled by the banking elites and at the IMF. Since 2009, China's central bank has called for the SDR to become a super sovereign reserve currency. In other words, a global currency. In 2017, the vice governor of China's central bank stated that the central banks should increase their use of the SDR as a unit of account and that greater SDR liquidity should be encouraged. In 2015, China's central bank suggested that the SDR system should go digital, creating a digital version of the reserve system so that it could spread quickly. It should come as no surprise that the IMF is in full agreement with this plan and has even suggested in recent articles on its website that cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology are the future evolution of the monetary system. To all you folks out there that are invested in these cryptocurrencies, you should always never leave all your eggs in one basket, financially speaking, right? Notorious globalist George Soros revealed a few darker details of what the IMF calls a global economic reset in an interview in 2009. These details included a diminished American economy, a diminished dollar, and for China to become a new economic engine for the world. So you can say all the world's a stage, correct? Finally, China has clearly been prepping for a considerable crisis in the dollar or in the world economic stability as shown in its sudden and aggressive stockpile of gold reserves the past decade, only recently surpassed by Russia in purchases. China is one of the most aggressive national buyers of gold. An expanding gold stockpile would be an effective hedge against a collapsing dollar market. If the dollar loses world reserve status, nations like China and Russia and placed well to mitigate the damages, considering the fact that the IMF officially holds around 3,000 tons of gold as well. The globalists are also well placed for a dollar crash. It would appear that China has been included at many levels in the plan for a global reset. All of the previous mentioned actions suggest foreknowledgeable of a dramatic shift in the dollar model. The trade war itself provides perfect cover for the economic reset. As I've been warning in my latest articles, China will play an important role in the reset as they have the ability to dump U.S. treasuries in the dollar as world reserve, causing a chain reaction throughout global markets, and as their trading partners follow suit. They will likely do this quietly, as Russia recently did, in order to pawn off their T-bond holdings before news of a treasury dump hits the mainstream. The primary beneficiaries of this act will be the globalists, while China has placed itself to survive, not necessarily to thrive during the chaos. The same cannot necessarily be said for the U.S., which suffers for the Achilles heels of total dependency on the dollar's primacy. So right there, my friends, that's why these central bankers, like the Federal Reserve, should be locked up for treason and shut them down. RICO is unconscious. That's why the gold, we should always believe in gold and silver coins, which is written in our Constitution on Article 1, Section 8. And, of course, Article 1, Section 10 with the states to use gold and silver coins for financial transactions, not paper or anything like that. This is why, my friends, I tell everyone, never leave all your security financial aids in one basket. And the person like myself have to prep up for this matter as well. Because the crap hits the fan, you know how the mainstream news are all going to point the finger at the Trump administration. Hey, I'm critical towards the man myself, but they're going to use him as the scapegoat for everything. And whatever you do, like him or not, don't fall for the hype. Don't believe it. If you do, then you're being punked and duped. Plain and simple. And that's why China is going to be the next Uncle Tom to the New World Order. Yes, I can say that on an ethical basis. They're the ones who be the bellboys to the banksters. There's one thing I know for sure, my friends. The curse, Hamilton's curse, has continued. And this is why you never call us capitalism or open free market capitalism. It's called Hamiltonianism. I recommend everyone start reading that book, Hamilton's Curse, by Thomas J. DiLorenzo. He knows exactly where he's coming from. If you read his book, you'd be surprised the merits he has, and they can go further. All right, and this is why the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the United States should withdraw from them immediately. Congressman Ron Paul said that. They called him the nut job. Well, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. That's all I have to say. I thank everyone for listening, plus feel free to download and share us throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you want to send something that's interesting you may want to check out, whatever you do, please address your correspondence with decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedoms Network, Minds.com, FutureNet.club, Picture.com/look3 with 3 eyes. If you're going to be a donor, that would be awesome. You can hit me at gab.ai, yours.org, oneway.com, and buddylist.co, which that's a cool site, folks. You got some like-minded people on there as well. These alternative, decentralized social media sites. In addition, you can email me at lookatlook3@gmail.com or to encrypted ones, mainly with the Proton Mail account, lookatlook03@protonmail.com. All right, my friends. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that the demoniac resistance healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.